Hello and welcome to F5 for Kids, a podcast about guiding your kids on the path to financial independence and extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Dominic DeLaquil. Our guest today is author, financial coach, and communications expert Scott Yamamura. In his book, Financial Epiphany, Scott simplifies complex financial concepts to make them accessible and understandable for anyone, and he also explains his money-multiplying superpower concept, which is especially relevant for kids and young adults. So we're definitely going to talk about that today. So welcome, Scott, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Dominic. Good to be here.
So let's start where I usually always start. Let's talk about what you learned about money when you were growing up, whether that was things your parents talked to you about specifically, or whether that was just sort of things you picked up on. So,
yeah, you bet. Yeah, when I was growing up, my mom always said, talking about money was like talking about your underwear. And by that, she meant it was a private topic, and we shouldn't be out there boasting about our bank accounts, certainly. And that's what she was getting at. However, if we don't talk about money, we can be going about it in a suboptimal way, all alone, silently suffering. And really, the statistics say that that is very true, that if we don't learn about money from somewhere, somebody, these healthy habits, that what we do on the outside might be causing what we're doing underneath with our bank accounts to be going about it in a suboptimal way. So my parents, they spent frugally. They set a pretty good example, but there weren't very defined lessons. I got things as short as, when I started my career, invest in a 401k because there's free money in it. And that was it. And so...
Sure. And by that, they meant the matching?
The matching. And so Yeah, and you can get really good advice, and I absolutely did follow in their footsteps in many ways. Spent a little bit more frugally, would try to straighten out a nail before I bought a new one, try to make it work with things I had around the house before I went to the store. Absolutely. It put very good practices into place because they're modeling behavior. And that's the strongest teacher. Absolutely. The parent-to-child modeling is so strong because it's every day, all day. It is so valuable. That's why I love what you're doing here, teaching parents how to talk to kids and teach them all day, every day. But yeah, it was very, very simple, the lessons that I got. And if I wanted to know anything else outside of that, I had to go seek it out myself, because financial lessons, they were great, they were healthy, but they were brief.
Yeah, right. Man, that's so common. I mean, and people, and just, the modeling is good. And so it's good that you picked up on the frugality and being aware of sort of what you're spending. But it's just interesting what people pick up on growing up when they're not having those more specific conversations. So then, and you've got a son, what have you been teaching him about money? Have you taken a different approach with him?
Yeah, absolutely. I think half the battle is that modeling and having good behavior. Obviously, you can't say one thing and do another. Right. But then the other thing is all the details and all the understanding and all the comprehension that takes you just that much further. Because when I did start doing this or that, I did things timidly. And really with money, that's not the way we want to go, if possible. Because when we are young, that's actually when we have the greatest leverage. And I talk about it like it's an ability, like it's a athletic ability where we have this window of time where we can really act with this leveraged power with money, and it actually diminishes over time. And so when I talked to Logan, it probably started around age 7 or so, when I thought, okay, we can start with simple concepts. So let's start with the bank divided up into 3, giving, saving, spending, and talk about how we're going to split it up percentage-wise out of every dollar that comes in. So we were doing 10% towards giving and 20% towards saving, and then the other 70% he could spend. And we've kept with that ever since. He's 16 now. The other thing that we did around age 7 was we actually started saving for his college savings that young. And I remember when my wife first called up the bank and asked, hey, we've got a son just born. This was 7 years earlier. We're looking into a 529 college savings plan. Mm-hmm. And the associate on the other end of the line said, oh, you don't need to worry about that yet. They're so young. But that is the opposite of how I teach, which is that is exactly when you want to start as early as possible, as far away and before these costs actually are incurred, because money is multiplying. And so we did wait a little bit till he was 7. But certainly as we started to invest and save into this, we started to teach him. And I actually show him those statements, the quarterly statements, to show him what's happening. I want him to understand the stock market. I want him to understand index funds and the 529 plan and custodial accounts. Because if he understands these things, unlike me, here's one thing when we were talking about how you were raised, is that my understanding of the stock market was that it was gambling, was that it was risky, that we want to stay arm's length away from it. And I've learned differently over the years that actually that's a very common way to save. Warren Buffett says if you bet against America, you're betting against yourself for the most part, because American business and entrepreneurship is always pushing. This economy is always expanding. And when you're betting on America, you're betting on success over the long run. And so the stock market is exactly that. It's owning a piece, owning a share of American companies, and everybody is pushing to succeed, and everybody is pushing for life to get more convenient and more comfortable and more successful in all these ways, technology and products and services and otherwise.
Yeah,
so
I think
go ahead.
That's an important piece, because I know if you're a couple things that I just want to chime in with. I think it's really cool that you started teaching him those things young, because then part of what that does is it makes it less overwhelming and less scary as he gets older, right? As kids get older, and when they start to then come into their own and they're young adults and they're starting to make decisions for themselves, and they've got to start planning a little bit going forward, or they want to reach financial independence, at a younger age, then they're not just like, I don't even know where to begin, and it just seems so overwhelming. Or they hear people talk about, oh man, if I wish I would have invested in this thing, or this thing is trending and blah, blah, blah. And that's where it can become, well, hold on, that's like gambling. You're trying to time the market, right? Which is not, for example, what Warren Buffett does. Right? And so when you're investing in a more diversified way in the market, it's exactly what you're saying, which is you're investing in a broad range of businesses, right? And some of those businesses are not going to do great. Others are going to take off, and a lot are going to do okay or have normal ups and downs. But their focus is all, hey, we've got this business. I want to be successful. And so that's your whole point of American entrepreneurship, American small businesses, American large corporations, all of them, they're all doing everything they can to be successful. And as an aggregate, that's certainly been the case over time. So it's not gambling. It's investing in businesses, right?
Yep, we're all in this together, is another way of saying it.
Yep. No, that's great. That's a great way to say it.
And a couple things along those lines, just when you mentioned how I'm raising my son. So without teaching our kids, here's a common understanding. You start working. Hey, you can save later. You're going to get promoted later. You're going to make more money later. Just wait till later. Middle age, you got a lot of things to worry about right now. You got college loans, what classes are you going to take? You got your relationship that you're in. You might get married one day, your first place where you're going to live. Don't even worry about money. Put it off for the future. When you're a manager or something later, then you can worry about money. That's a great myth, that waiting until later doesn't have any repercussions, because like we had mentioned, the younger you are, it's all about multiplying. It's like planting the seed for a tree. You can't plant it in your 40s and hope that when you're 41, there's going to be a tree. You plant it when you're young, and then there's a tree later that is proliferating in so many ways, creating shade and comfort for people, creating fruit and feeding people, and can be cut down and sawed and turned into a house, and proliferate and throw out more seeds that do the same thing and grow more trees. And so that's one great myth, is waiting till later. And we need to teach our kids that that's not necessarily the case. Yes, you can become savvier later. You can optimize later. But really, what outdoes all of that is time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the child that invests earlier can beat out the savvy investor that starts later. It's really ridiculous. There's this whole David and Goliath thing going on here. The other thing is there's this great irony, as most people will be properly distracted with the many things of life, like I mentioned, college and a relationship and getting married one day potentially, and where you're going to live and getting a house and having a child, all these things. And by the time that we need to deal with money, oh, I need to save for retirement. Oh, I might need to help my parents out with their retirement. Oh, I might want to send my kids to college one day. I call that the day of reckoning, where we gotta face this, and those distractions are getting set aside, and we really have to face this. But by the time the common person wants and cares about money, our multiplying power has reduced. And the funny thing, the irony is when we're young, our multiplying power is the greatest, but we don't care at that time. And that's where the education comes in. That's why we're doing what we're doing, trying to spread the message now so that kids don't grow up to be adults and say, oh, the most common thing for retirees to say regarding their finances is, I wish I had started earlier. I wish I had done this with more vigor earlier. Why didn't anybody tell me? That's why we're telling you right now.
Yeah, no, that's the whole reason I started the podcast, right? As I was having conversations just with friends and stuff that I knew about financial independence and the whole FIRE movement and all that stuff. And I just kept saying, man, just think if we'd have known this stuff when we were younger. And then finally, like the two things sort of clicked together for me. So yeah, right. If we can set kids on that path, even if they're not super gung ho about it, but you've taught them, like you've taught Logan, the basics, and they're doing that. And we're going to get into this in a minute, right? This whole, because you keep coming back to this, that they have the time is their biggest advantage, right? The sooner they can start, and if we can just get them to plant those seeds early and start with some good habits, man, it really just sets them up in the long run. So I jumped in there. You were talking about you and your wife had set up a 529 for him. And I know kind of the way that you approach that ties in with this whole idea of the doubling that you've already sort of mentioned. So talk about how you approached his 529 fund for college.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great example. And after I give that example, I definitely want to talk about what's under the hood. But the 529 plan, I would have saved timidly. What we did was we started when he was 7 years old. Logan was 7, and we stopped when he was 9. Now that to my wife sound impossible to understand. Why would you stop saving? Don't we need to keep saving every year until he's in college? And I pointed out to her, I said, no, because we understand how money doubles. So if we save half of what he needs and we just stop at age 9, so we're going to calculate how much we think college is going to cost when he's 18, money can actually double. And that's one of the basic principles that I teach is under common circumstances, a 529 plan in this case, 401k plan, IRA, retirement plan, is that under common circumstances, money can double. That means, and if it's doubling in an amount of years we understand, in this case, 10 years, and we'll get into that. Mm-hmm. If my calculation is that money can double every 10 years, well, 10 years before he goes to college, I only need to save half and it will double. So because we saved between age 7 and 9, we stopped because I said to my wife, well, this money is going to double. And it certainly has, and done more than that. Now, my son's only 16, so he already has enough to go to college and pay tuition plus some, and he hasn't even entered the college campus yet. And college for him and for us as a family will cost just a fraction of the cost because we saved early and understood that that amount that we saved and front-loaded could double. So we haven't had to do anything with his college since 7 years ago when he was 9 years old. And it's amazing to watch that college fund increase faster than the cost of college tuition is increasing.
Yeah.
Cool. It was below college tuition and then it met it and was the same amount. Now it's bypassed it. And now he's still got 2 years to go and the 4 years that he's in college. So it could keep growing faster and faster. And certainly there's a surplus already.
Yeah. No, that's cool. So you've put that in a 529. So then we're back to really that's invested in the stock market, right? So invested in businesses. And as the stock market grows and increases in value over time. So it has ups and downs, obviously, right? It's down right now from where it was, 6 months ago or even 3 months ago. But over time, it always increases, and it increases over the history of the U.S. stock market. The average is about 8%, right? And so sometimes it's a lot more. Sometimes it goes down for a while and takes a while to recover, but over time, and that's where you get into this concept of doubling, right? So that's something that's called the rule of 72.
You got it.
So why don't you take a second and explain the rule of 72? And with the 10 years, you're kind of rounding a little bit. So just let's talk about the rule of 72, because that's really kind of the basis for then the power of 16 that I want to talk about here in a minute. So let's explain 72 first.
Yeah. So money is overwhelming. It's intimidating. We're filled with guilt and regret, the common person. Have I been operating with it properly up until now? By the time I want to find out about this thing, I'm a little scared to. Do I want to open the envelope and take a look at what's inside? And so to understand money, I like the idea of taking things we don't know. Money, that was me. I didn't get it for many, many years. Taking things we don't know and understanding them with things that we do know.
Yeah.
Now, this rule of 72, it's a rule of thumb. So simple. We could try to understand the world and universe of money and get analysis paralysis and freeze. My approach is just learn only the things you need to know. That's it. The simplest things to succeed that will take care of 99.9% of your finances for life. Just do that. You don't have to know everything. You just need to know just the basics. The rule of 72 is just that. And so it's so easy. You take the number 72 and you divide it by whatever rate of return you're getting. A savings account might return under a 1% return, an interest rate, right? The stock market, like you say, could be around 8%. Now, the number I love is 7.2. Why? It's a little bit more conservative than that 8%, meaning you're leaving some buffer. The stock market will likely be able to give you that return, that 7.2%. The other thing is when you take the number 72 and you divide it by a 7.2% rate of return, you're ending up with 10. And 10 is a beautiful number. What that 10 means is it'll take 10 years to double your initial investment when you're earning 7.2% rate of return over that time. And 10 is the loveliest number. We all love 10. It's one of our favorite numbers to multiply, add, subtract, and divide by. This is something we can do our entire life without a calculator. And if we're only trying to understand money simply, not the whole universe, we're just trying to understand simply to succeed, then this calculation is the most beautiful thing in the world that can help us win with money our whole life.
So just to recap, right? So the rule of 72 is, right? So if you divide 72 by your expected rate of return, that's the amount of time that it's going to take for that money you have invested to double, right? Double. So what you're saying is if you take 72 and divide it by 7.2% that you feel like you're going to be able to earn from the stock market, then it's going to take 10 years and the money that you've put in will then be double, which is what you basically did for your son, right? You had 2 years that you put money in and then that's been able to double. And that's why you stopped at age 9, because you knew, look, if we just let because I know everybody, and this is great that this is cool because you've kind of switched the way a lot of us talk about it and think about it, right? Because there's a lot of talk about, compound interest and the miracle of compound interest. And that's the whole point of, we're back to like the 401k. The magic of your 401k is not that you get a match. I mean, that's great because it is free money, but really the magic is the compound interest, which is that money from the stock market. So the 7.2 or the 8%, whatever number you want to pick around that range, right? It's going to earn that. And as you put in more, right, it earns not just on what you're putting in and what you originally had, but also it earns on the money that it's earning from the 7 or the 8%. Right? And what you're saying is the rule of 72 is another way to look at that from a different angle is your money's going to double every 10 years, right?
And that's
if the stock market does what it's always done.
Yep. Under common circumstances, if we were to break this down to its simplest form, under common circumstances, money is going to double every 10 years. Now, what's under the hood is 7.2% interest rate, or rate of return, I should say, and that it's in something like index funds, mutual funds, IRA, 401k, 529 plan.
Yeah, some diversified fund type portfolio.
Yeah. So when we say stocks, loving index funds, like one that follows the S&P 500, and other ways of being diversified, but investing in those American businesses, like we say, or even worldwide businesses is what I should say, especially right now.
Well, yeah. Well, and the thing about that too, when you're looking at it in terms of a 10-year window and multiples of that, then that also gives you some peace of mind, like, oh man, it's going down right now. But unless you're thinking, I've got to start taking that money out, next month or in 3 months, it's like, it's okay. it's going down right now, but it's going to come back up. And when it comes back up at some point, some of those years, it's going to grow a lot more than 7.2% because what you're looking at is the average, right? So you get that average. And again, if you look back at the whole history of the stock market, like that's why it's not, well, one of the reasons it's not gambling, right? It's like, well, no, you can see the historical data and it's pretty clear. The stock market performs at around that range over time in the long haul, right? So the doubling also helps you just understand it in a simple way so that you don't get that analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah.
But it also gives you some peace of mind in times like right now when the market's down, like, that's okay. And then we're back to, right? Also, the longer the time you have, it's even more peace of mind because like, it'll be fine. There's going to be plenty of ups and downs. I don't have to worry about those.
Yeah. Another way of looking at it, just in our example, is if money doubled and then some already. So if we had just held on to the money in cash, we would still have the same amount as we did, 8 years ago or so. But because it's doubled and more, it's okay if it comes down, because even that it's come down some, it's still double than it was before. And so you've got massive amounts of buffer now, because when you double what you have, you can have fluctuations and you don't even care, because it's like, wow, this is way more than we started with. It's 100%, 150% more than what we started with already. It's okay if it fluctuates 5, 10, even 30%. Way more than we started with.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Great point. Today's episode is sponsored by Million Stories, a Singleton Foundation program. Using the power of storytelling and entertainment to make learning about finances and entrepreneurship fun and engaging, Million Stories is a video channel with over 30 original short series on all sorts of subjects. There's Adulting with NFL star Richard Sherman, Wags to Riches about pet businesses, Ramen Profitable about bootstrapping startups, Your Brain on Money about how our brains respond to branding and other influences that affect our money management. There's George Goes Everywhere, where George goes to a city and explores having a great weekend for $100. There's also Startup Kids, the journey of working with a financial coach, and so many more. Please visit millionstories.com to learn more and check out some of the episodes. And thanks to Million Stories and the Singleton Foundation for sponsoring this episode. So the big advantage that kids have is time, because they're not going to be able to put in as much money as somebody who's really at the height of their career, right? So now I want to talk about the superpower concept, which is the power of 16. So talk about that. Explain that to everyone.
You got it. Power of 16. Okay, so there are 3 rules of thumb. And as you know, I love rules of thumb because I love the rule of 72, which is running under the hood of all of this. So there's 3 understandings I want to get across. The first one we already talked about, that money can double every 10 years. And because we're teaching kids, I always like taking some sort of story, some sort of object, and making a parallel with it. So to begin with, here's a Rubik's Cube. This has 43 quintillion possibilities with each turn of this is creating a new possibility, right? But you don't have to understand every single option. All you have to understand is just the few steps to be able to solve this thing. And my son and he challenged me to solve this thing. And I had imposter syndrome. I did not think I could learn this thing. But when I understood just the right steps to take, I was able to get it. So the same is true with money. And when we talk about money doubling, there's this classic experiment called the marshmallow test, where a single marshmallow was set before a child and the researcher would leave the room. Hey, if I come back and you haven't eaten that marshmallow, I'm going to give you a second one. And I love that. That's delayed gratification. If we don't eat the first marshmallow and we wait, we get a second marshmallow. Why? I looked at that and I said, well, what child would want to stop right there? Wouldn't every child in the world say, wait a second, I'm catching on to this. Can you leave the room again? I want these 2 marshmallows to turn into 4. Go away. Oh my goodness, there are 4 marshmallows now. Wait, leave again. 4 marshmallows are multiplying into 8. Leave one more time. 8 marshmallows are doubling into 16. Oh my goodness. By that point, this child is like, all right, I figured out the system. I am totally on top of this. And they can start eating their marshmallows, and then the leftovers are doubling yet again. Now, the crazy thing about that is exactly how money works. It's doubling and doubling again. Now, when we talk about that 10-year period of time that money can double every 10 years, who works 10 years? Most people will work longer than that. Now, I know we're talking about financial independence, but let's talk about first the most common duration of a career, which is 40 years.
Yep.
4 sets of 10. That means 1 marshmallows turning into 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16. The same with money. $1,000 is going to double into 2,000, into 4,000, into 8,000, and finally, in our 60s, at age 62 is what I like to talk about, a common retirement age, is that $1,000 could turn into $16,000, and every $1,000 you put in can turn to $16,000 on the other end. It's pretty wild. Yeah, and that's causing us to be later minded in order to think. A smaller percentage of people will say, oh, every $1,000 I put in when I start working turns into $16,000. A smaller percentage of people will get excited by that and will take action on that. And I was sitting at my dining room table one day and I was like, okay, I know the personalities in my life, the friends and the family, where that doesn't excite them. They're not going to take action. And I'm like, I do. Just like I told you with my son's college savings plan. I was all over that, super excited. But I realized that not a lot of other people were excited. In fact, the majority of people weren't. And so I scratched my head and I said, okay, how do they need to hear it? How do they need to hear it? And then I flipped the chart. And instead of saying, put in $1,000, wait for $16,000 later, I flipped the chart by saying, okay, you have the power of 16 now. It's not about money multiplying to be $16,000 later. You have this multiplying power of 16. You have an ability. You own this. It's like being an athlete. It's like having this athletic ability, and it's at its prime right now. Right now is its highest potency. So if I have the power of 16 right now, and it's this ability I own, well, what's happening over time? I should use it right now, because 10 years later, it's the power of 8.
Yeah, which is dramatic, right?
It's dramatic. You've just lost the power of 8, and now you've got the power of 8 left. It halved. And 10 years later, we're at 42 now. Now it's only the power of 4. And when you're 52, you got the power of 2. And when you retire, you're actually spending down your money and enjoying the fruits of your labor, which is a great thing. But this multiplying power, once we understand that it's halving and diminishing every 10 years, that creates what we call a sense of urgency. And it also utilizes a concept called loss aversion. We're more likely to act when we think we're losing something. It actually causes us to act with twice the intensity. Oh my goodness, I'm losing something, I have to take action. That's twice as important to us as a human being, then, I'll double my money. Okay. When I'm losing, it actually, even though the same thing is happening, we're actually twice as impacted by that mentally. And so that's why I use loss aversion to get people to get that sense of urgency and take action. So the power of 16, it's the easiest way to understand it. Once again, we're going simple here. So if we tell people, when you start your career, you have this multiplying power of 16 with your money, and it halves every 10 years. Bingo. Simplest framework ever. That's all we need to know. And it's causing people to take action with their money when they were floating in space before and didn't have their feet planted flat on the ground, like me. I had no idea which way was up and down. Now I know, I started with the power of 16. And it halves every 10 years. I'm going to take action. I'm going to save for my son's college, because now I get what's happening. And my son's college account is the perfect example of actually getting up and taking confident action because I understood that framework.
Yeah. And that's a really cool switch on things. And I really like that you bring up this idea, because it's easy. It's like, because so many of us or have learned some things or know enough. I'm supposed to put money in my 401k, and I know compound interest and it'll grow, and that's all great. But I'll get to that. I'll get to that later. I'm right. You just, I know I need to set that up, and you just never get there, right? Especially like you said, when you're young. I mean, you use 22 as kind of your starting point age for your example and explanation of all this, right? So you're out of college, right? You're still young, and it's like, I know I should do that, but so many other things that are way more interesting at that age, all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's way more exciting than thinking about, I got to put money into savings so I can invest it, blah, blah, blah. So it's really cool that you turned it around, inverted it so that now it's like, wait a minute, I'm losing something. Every year I wait, I'm losing multiplying time. And if I wait 10 years, I've lost half of my multiplying power, right? Which means if I want to get to the same point at the same age, I've now got to put a lot more money aside than if I would have started when I was 22. I mean, so if parents can help teach their kids these things before they leave the house, and even just get used to having conversations with their kids about money. So it's not like talking about underwear. So then when their kids are in college or they get out of college and they're young adults and they're trying to figure things out, they're comfortable having these conversations with you. And then even if you've explained this to them and they've forgotten about it, you bring it up again. And then especially if you can tap into that concept of loss aversion and get them started. Because even if it's small, just get started, because it's still back to the biggest advantage that you have when you're younger. You don't have the money you have when you're 50, right? But you have time.
Yep.
You have the time.
Yep. And that means everything.
Yeah.
There's a couple examples to bring up as you were talking there that tie in. And so just to get an idea about what this really means. All right, so we're used to the 40-hour work week, right? Now let's say we're going to get paid a regular wage for that 1 week of work. Okay, that's what we expect. Now, let's imagine that you work those same 40 hours, but they're going to pay you double. I mean, we are off the charts excited. Oh my goodness, double the pay for half the amount of work or a regular amount of work? You're going to give me double? That's amazing. It's an incredible thing. And that's what it's like to have the power of two, as if you're working and then they're paying you double. That's amazing. Every single one of us would go work that job or go work that week if we were going to get paid double. And so I want people to be really excited about that. Even if we're in our 50s and only getting started, having the power of two is incredible. I just came back from Sierra Leone, Africa, where money doesn't double. And folks there that we were spending time with, one of the main activities of the day might be going to the well and getting your water, might be trying to get a bag of rice or some food for the day. Or many of these kids don't eat unless they're going to school and get fed a free lunch there. And that might be their only meal all day. We live in a place of prosperity and opportunity in the United States. I never want us to forget that. So the doubling of money is incredible. But get this, let's say we work that same week and we have the power of 16. It's like we work 1 week and we get paid for 4 months. That's how off the charts the power of 16 is. And I really want people to get excited about that and understand that. See, when we take something we don't know and we tie it into something we do know, it starts to make sense. And what we do know is, I understand what 1 week of work is and 1 week's worth of pay. But now 1 week worth of work, 4 months worth of pay. Now I understand the power of 16. It starts to click then. Now you're going to take advantage of it because you get that leveraging power. You understand that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that we haven't even talked about yet is, so if you start this young and you're working things from this mindset, then it also, as you move along, it opens up the possibility of, well, okay, could I use this to stop working sooner than before I reach 62? Right? Could I use this to, maybe I don't have to stop working, but I'm going to cut back and work less? What if, and so right, for each individual person, they can, once they understand the concepts, and then they're kind of getting into their life and they know what their expenses are and what matters to them and where they want to spend money and where they cannot, then they can start trying to tweak this a little bit and be like, well, hold on, wait a minute. So I'm coming up on 42. This has doubled for me twice. Now maybe, and I'm kind of getting a little sick of working all the time. So maybe what I want to do is I want to cut back to part-time and just work 20 hours a week. How does that work? If I have less money to put in and save, but if I still put in some into my 401k and that continues to double with what I already have that continues to double, what does that look like? Then am I able to safely retire, still at 62, but I can work less in the meantime and have more time to do other things in my life I want to do? Or do I want to change jobs to do something that, man, I'm really passionate about, but I have to earn less money? I mean, so what it does is, it, like all things sort of as you're working towards financial independence, it gives you more flexibility and more options, right? And so,
You said it.
yeah, I mean,
Yep.
yeah, right. So, I mean, so I think it's great that, because you've built out a framework so that it's like, oh, you get your head around it, which again is so important, right? To take, because you can go into, and if you want to, if it's your thing and you really want to get into all the little intricate details of finance and money and all these different things, and you like that, then you should. But a lot of people don't. It's like, I don't want to do that. I know I should do something with my money. And so this idea that you have where you've made it as simple as possible is so useful for so many people and so powerful. So if you don't do anything other than, hey, you know what? I put my money into a whole market fund and I started early and I'm just going to let it double. And then I'm not going to think about it. You're still going to be set. But right. And at 22, that may be all you want to think about, because again, you're back to, I want to think about all these other cool things in my life that I want to think about. Right. But by the time you're 42, you may want to start to think about it differently. Be like, hey, how can I use this in a way that's a little bit different and change the amount that I'm working or whatever it might be. So it's just still about creating options, but starting your kids on that path early just gives them more opportunities, more potential.
That's right. You said it right there. Options. I love that word, options. We just want to give ourselves options. So if we take the most common approach for the average person, so starting work at a career at age 22, working for 40 years, when we invest, getting a 7.2% rate of return. When we do these most common things, then we can understand something that was hard to understand, right? So it starts with that. And then when we start winning and creating all this buffer and overage, now we have choice. Oh, you know what? Oh, I could stop working anytime if I want. That's what we want people to be able to say. You can, if you're setting yourself up for the most common race and you're saying, I'm going to win this race. I'm going to understand it, rather than, financial literacy is at a low. And so most people are not understanding it. And 70% of us, via some studies, are paycheck to paycheck. 70% are in debt, up to about $100,000. Financial literacy is at a low. We have the student loan crisis, the retirement crisis, the housing crisis. All these things are saying we have normalized not operating with money in a healthy way. Most of us are not getting it. That's why I developed this plan, which is for most people. And when you start winning and you realize that you already passed the finish line back there and you're still running, you're like, oh, I can keep running if I want. I like this. I can stop if I want to, because I already won the race back there. And that's what you're talking about, which is, let's go ahead and get to this place where we can stop working, or we can choose something else that aligns with our passion. And it's a lot better than what we're hearing on the opposite side, which is, I think I have to work until I die. Yeah. Some people don't have that choice. And the statistics also say that half of people will rely on Social Security as a massive part of half or so of their retirement. They'll have to rely on that. And you have 10% of people that rely on Social Security for an even larger portion, maybe about 90% of their income. And so we rely heavily on this government benefit program and hoping that it's going to stay alive for us. But what we're encouraging people to do is to be the master of their own destiny.
Yeah.
Social Security is a nice thing to have if it's there for us. But what if we can rely on ourselves and open up that choice that we're talking about?
Yeah. Well, and again, if you start young, even if you don't start young, but especially if you start young, it's not that hard to do. And again, when you're younger, you don't have as much disposable or excess income, but you don't have to have a ton because you have time on your side. As you get older, you have, well, it depends, right? Potentially, if you've learned some things about money and you've been self-aware and you're careful with your money, you have excess money. You're earning more, your earning power maybe is at its greatest, and you can sock a lot of money away to try and make up for the lost time. It's still not as good as the time, but it's something. The problem though, right, and kind of back to what you were saying, is so many people, they're not paying attention even as they move into middle age, and they've not been good with their money. And so every time they earn more, then their expenses go up. Well, we got to get a nicer house, or, oh, hey, we're going to buy, we got to get new cars, or we've got to, whatever it is. And so they never make any progress, even though they're making more money. So there are plenty of people who look like, oh, they look like they're pretty well off. They're doing great. And they're living paycheck to paycheck. And then that's what's really scary, because then that's where you do feel trapped and you do feel stuck and you don't have options. And then if you're counting on, Social Security to cover most of what you're doing, that's great that it's there. But to depend only on that is something you have less control over than if you just started with good habits when you were young and put that money, invested it, and let it double for you, right? And take advantage of the power of 16. And because having financial stability and knowing you have, like you said, like you've already won, you've got this money there. It's like, oh man, it's such a stress reliever and reduces so much anxiety in people's lives. So, I think it's really great, Scott, what you've done. And I think, the importance of being able to take complicated ideas that a lot of times will confuse people and overwhelm them, and then they want to, their brains just shut down. The skill that it takes to take those things and simplify those, I think, is really underappreciated. And so, you've obviously got that skill. So I just want to commend you on thinking about these things and putting it together and then putting it out there for people and trying to make an effort to teach them and help give them a way to grab onto it. That's like, oh, I get it. Right. Oh, and it's not that complicated. I can do that. Oh, and not only can I do this, but man, I got to start this now because otherwise I'm losing multiplying power. So I think that's super cool. It's really cool what you've done, man. It's really great.
Yeah. Thanks for allowing me to share about it. We just want to get the message out and empower people because great financial understanding and great financial health, it creates healthier marriages, healthier families. It can have a generational effect. There can be surpluses to share with the community and the world. Yeah. And we're just all much better off if we have financial health. Now, certainly there's other categories of life we want to get figured out as well, like career and our emotional side and relationships. Finances it's one of those pillars, and it is a big one because we operate with finances every single day, in and out. And that's another thing I like to point out is that many of us Americans feel like, oh, it's like underwear. We don't need to be talking about this, Yeah. But I'll put it this way: we can spend about 18 years educating ourselves to earn money. We can spend up to 40 years or so earning the money. We can spend another 18 years retiring, spending the money. We'll spend almost our whole life immersed in operating money, but we won't go out and learn about it. We owe it to ourselves and our families to understand this. And once again, when we look at the statistics, I understood that, yep, let's just get the simplest thing out there to just get people started. We need the masses to get this. And just get started. And you can always add in savviness and complexity later, which is what I've done. I started out simple, and then I just found out this is like a wolf masquerading in sheep's clothing. Money's kind of more approachable than ever I thought before. It's not as scary as I thought. And then once you start to get that, it's not so bad. Then you're like, oh, I do want to learn more. I am hungry for this understanding. Yeah. Let's do optimize things. We've been going at this, very simply just to win the big win. But now let's try to tweak this a little bit more. And you can keep doing that. I mean, I talk about other things like grow a financial garden, and don't just plant one tree, but plant many so that there's a win over here. Oh my goodness, my son's able to go to college. Oh my goodness, retirement's taken care of. Oh my goodness, here's a fund that can help give to the community with the because it's laying a golden egg. The goose that lays the golden egg is constantly creating funds, and you can go spend that funds, and then the gooses next year are gonna lay another egg, and you can go do something with those funds, and I call that the forever fund when you do that. And so all sorts of amazing things you can do with money when you understand these concepts.
Yeah, and to start taking advantage of them, and just to hit it again, when you start younger, right? Because it just gives you more of that multiplying power. I mean, it really is like a superpower, right? Like you call it. So yeah, very cool. So tell us a little bit about the book. We've referenced it multiple times. So Financial Epiphany is the title of the book. So talk about that for a minute.
Absolutely. Financial Epiphany. It's right here. I'll put it in front of you so you can see what it's like. And I also have the artwork of it in the back. And the subtitle, very carefully thought out words. My editors made sure we did this. Discover your ability to multiply money. That's what we've been talking about. And discover. We use that word discover because most people, we just don't realize it. We don't know we have it. And that's why I feel like I love that athlete, that sports analogy, because we're like an athlete that doesn't know we have this potential, but the coach sees it in us. And so that's what this book is like. It's like the coach. It's telling the athlete, you have this ability. You didn't know it. Most people don't. But let's describe it to you in such a way that you're going to go out there, you're going to choose to go out there on the field, and you're going to make a difference. For instance, let's say someone's in debt and they're sulking and saying to themselves, this money thing, I just have a bad experience with it. But if a coach comes in and says, all right, you're able to be a star player. I see that potential in you. You can, in the student's analogy, get your grades up because you have to get a certain grade point average so that you can be on this team. And then you're going to set records. And the same thing goes here with finances is that, hey, if you had a bad experience with money, let's get you out of debt first. Let's pay off the credit card and pay off the student loan and the car loan. And now let's go out this thing with such vigor because, yes, some of your multiplying years have passed you. But if we get started now, you have the most multiplying power you will ever have. And then the second part of the subtitle is reimagine your financial life. And the reason why I used that phrase is because I was able to do that when my finances got cleared up, debt got paid off, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. And now there's just this freedom and options. And I love using that term financial garden, where there's these financial trees that we've birthed up. And now this one's, bearing fruit. That one's bearing fruit. That one's bearing fruit. There's good stuff happening around every single corner. And that's what I want for everybody, is not to be locked down and suppressed by debt and overspending. So some of it is what we opt into. We make the choice to spend and overspend. But financial freedom is definitely around the corner. The book is there to walk you right through how to get there, even getting out of debt. Yes, understanding multiplying money. And then it also ends with a chapter I love called From Products and Prices to People and Purpose. Because if we have this end goal in mind, this big why, and from people and purpose can even mean sending my kid to college, taking care of my parents, looking out for my grandchildren when I have them one day, creating change in my community or even around the world. That's such a strong driving factor. It can actually motivate you to get through understanding money and multiplying it and getting out of debt. So it's kind of a 3-part system that I described in the book. But the big thing in the middle is understanding those 3 financial epiphanies, the tools that will help you multiply your money.
Yeah, cool. I will put a link for that in the show notes for anybody who's interested, so you can pick up a copy. So that's really cool. If anybody wants to reach out to you, Scott, where can they find you?
Yeah, financialepiphany.com. So you're going to see the book on there. You can understand what the concepts are. You can get an idea on there. You can go to the contact page and email me. And I love having discussions with people that are interested in this, and I love explaining the process. I'm here for you.
Yeah, cool. Great. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, to restate simply, the takeaway is we have the power of 16 when we start our careers in our early 20s, and that multiplying power with money under the most common circumstances is diminishing every 10 years until the day we retire. And I want us all to be out there living the dream and in retirement as well, and enjoying the fruits of our labor. And we all want a happy ending here. So thanks, Dominic, for helping people get there and starting early. It's all about starting early. It's amazing what our children can do and what the young generations can do, and we can get out there and help them understand this. So please spread the word about the multiplying power that the young generation has and help them get on board and board this train, because it is a moving.
Great. That's great. Thank you so much, Scott, for coming on the show. Great information. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Dominic.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the FI for Kids podcast. Please support the show by hitting subscribe and receive new episodes every Thursday. The intro and exit music this episode are courtesy of Douglas Cameron. As always, you can find links to the FI for Kids music in the show notes. Thanks again, and we'll talk next week.
You're like the horizon. I can't reach you, you're so far away. And if I run to the place I want you to stay, you'd be gone. I'd be left wondering why you moved on, and why you never said goodbye. I can't wait any longer. I see the writing on the wall. It's time for us to say, tomorrow we are yesterday. Tomorrow we are yesterday. You're like the sunset. You're glowing bright, but you're fading. And what I don't get is why I'm left here waiting. But I'm like a phoenix. I will rise up from this fire. It's something we can't fix. I guess it's time for us to retire.